They were investigated, judged, and quietly filed away. Tonight, we reopen 3 cases that history nearly erased. In the late summer of 1868, Cincinnati, Ohio was a city balancing ambition and anxiety. The Civil War had ended only 3 years earlier, and the population was swelling with immigrants, laborers, and families chasing opportunity. Streets were crowded, factories roared, and children filled vacant lots from morning until dusk. Trust still existed in those working-class neighborhoods. Doors were left unlocked. Parents relied on familiarity and routine to protect what mattered most. But routine is fragile, and on September 6, 1868, that fragility shattered. Mary Mormon was a small child, the youngest daughter in a modest household. That Sunday afternoon, she left home to play near the familiar open spaces where neighborhood children gathered. Nothing seemed unusual. Several residents later recalled seeing children laughing, running, and passing the time as they always had. Among those recollections was a quieter detail. A man unfamiliar to some of the neighbors standing nearby. He did not speak. He did not interfere. He simply lingered. As the afternoon faded and children returned home one by one, Mary did not. At first, her absence caused little concern. Delays were common, but as daylight gave way to dusk, her family stepped outside and began calling her name. Neighbors were alerted. Lanterns were lit. The search expanded into vacant lots, narrow alleys, rail embankments, and paths leading toward the Ohio River. Police joined the effort. Through the night they searched, voices hoarse, hope thinning. Nothing was found. By dawn, exhaustion settled in. Then, a woman walking through a nearby vacant lot noticed something lying in the grass. At first, it looked like discarded clothing. As she approached, the stillness told a different story. It was Mary. Authorities secured the area. The coroner's examination determined the cause of death was strangulation. There were marks on her neck, consistent with deliberate force. The body had been exposed for hours. The location raised a disturbing question. Had searchers overlooked her during the night, or had her body been placed there after the search ended? Public outrage spread rapidly across Cincinnati. Newspapers printed the details in stark language. A reward was offered for information leading to an arrest. Suspects were detained based on proximity or reputation. Each was released for lack of evidence. Frustration grew. Fear hardened into anger. More than a year passed. Then another young girl was assaulted in similar fashion, but survived and described her attacker. Investigators compared details. Age of the victim, method of approach, location, patterns aligned closely enough to reopen Mary's case. Suspicion narrowed toward William Hanlon, a man seen lingering near children and present in the area on the day Mary disappeared. Witnesses described him observing rather than participating, remaining without purpose in public spaces. Opportunity became the central focus. Hanlon was arrested. Then came a claim that shifted the case dramatically. A fellow inmate alleged Hanlon had confessed while in jail. There was no recording, no witnesses. Only the word of a prisoner who may have had incentives to cooperate. Prosecutors added the confession to a growing pile of circumstantial evidence. At trial, the courtroom was packed. The prosecution presented sightings placing Hanlon near the scene, testimony from the surviving assault victim, and the alleged jailhouse confession. The defense challenged the reliability of long-delayed witness memories and questioned the motives of the inmate informant. There was no physical evidence directly linking Hanlon to Mary's death. No forensic proof. The jury deliberated knowing the city demanded resolution. They returned a verdict of guilty. Hanlon was sentenced to death and executed under Ohio law. The city exhaled, but beneath that relief, unease lingered. The case had been built on inference and accumulation rather than certainty. Justice had been delivered. Whether it had been precise remained an open question. While Cincinnati tried to move forward, rural Vermont faced its own tragedy. In the mid-19th century, life on scattered farms demanded endurance. Alice and Alman Mika lived on one such farm, financially strained and isolated. After the Civil War, Alman returned home physically diminished, suffering hearing damage and illness that reduced his ability to work. Poverty tightened its grip. Through Vermont's informal orphan placement system, 2 siblings, Alice and Henry, were assigned to the Mika household. The town provided modest compensation. The children were expected to work as they grew older. Crucially, Alman accepted them without consulting his wife. Neighbors later testified that the orphaned children were treated differently from the Mika's biological children. Punishments were frequent and severe. Food was withheld. Threats were overheard, cries carried beyond the farmhouse walls, yet no one intervened. Discipline was considered a private matter. One autumn day, in 1869, young Alice vanished. Alice Meeker claimed the child had been sent away, but her explanations shifted under questioning. Suspicion intensified. When separated from his wife and questioned by authorities, Almond Meeker confessed. He admitted purchasing. He described taking the child by carriage to a remote stream, forcing her to ingest the poison, watching as convulsions overtook her, and burying her body in a shallow grave. Authorities recovered the remains exactly where he said they would. Chemical analysis confirmed strychnine. At trial, neighbors recounted months of abuse. Ullman pleaded guilty. The case turned toward Alice Meeker. Prosecutors argued sustained cruelty and shared responsibility. The jury convicted her. She was sentenced to death and became the first woman legally executed in Vermont. Ullman's sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. The farm faded back into anonymity. The orphan placement system continued, largely unchanged. Reform did not follow tragedy. History moved on. Then, in July 1911, in the quiet English village of Longcross, 10-year-old Amy Reeves left home for school and never arrived. By evening, villagers were searching Chobham Common. Her father discovered her body in a shallow pond roughly 400 yards from home. Her shoes and stockings were placed neatly on the bank. Her dress was soaked. Bruises marked her head. A post-mortem revealed 4 head wounds sufficient to stun but not kill. The cause of death was drowning. A birch stick recovered from the pond bore strands of light brown hair consistent with Amy's. Suspicion fell on 15-year-old Albert Henry Hampton, a local boy frequently seen at the Reeves home. Witnesses described him carrying a freshly cut stick that day. He appeared unsettled in the afternoon hours, yet inconsistencies emerged. He had referred to his stick as cherrywood. The recovered branch was birch. A man on a bicycle had also been seen nearby asking for water. During the inquest, held under the Children's Act of 1908, the public was excluded. Testimony conflicted. No motive was established. No evidence of assault was found. After deliberation, the jury concluded Amy had been willfully murdered, but could not determine by whom. Hampton was released on bail and later formally discharged. No one else was charged. Years later, he enlisted in the British Army, was wounded in World War I, and received the Distinguished Conduct Medal. Amy Reeves' murder remains unsolved. 3 children, 3 communities, 3 outcomes that still echo through time. In Cincinnati, a conviction delivered closure but left questions about circumstantial justice. In Vermont, confession and execution closed the legal chapter but exposed systemic failures. In Surrey, uncertainty endured and no verdict ever came. Each case reveals something unsettling about justice, how it relies on evidence that may be incomplete, how pressure can accelerate decisions, how silence can conceal cruelty, and how sometimes truth slips beyond reach entirely. History records dates, verdicts, and sentences, but between those official lines lie doubt, hesitation, and human frailty. These cases were investigated, judged, and archived, yet certainty is rarely as solid as it appears. Tonight, we remember them not for spectacle, but because unresolved history deserves examination. And sometimes, when we reopen forgotten cases, we discover that what was buried was never fully resolved at all. Thanks for watching.